Hi Cheryl, thanks for talking with us today about the Montana Board of Housing's 50th anniversary. You ready to dive right in?
I am. Thanks so much for having me. It's my pleasure to talk about the Board of Housing and its work over the last 50 years and what we see going into the future.
Great. So can you tell us how Montana's Board of Housing differs from programs in other states?
Certainly. So the Montana Board of Housing is what's called a housing finance agency, and each state and some of our territories like Guam and Puerto Rico have a housing finance agency as well. Most housing finance agencies are more separated from state government than the Montana Board of Housing, and this poses some pros and cons for us. One of the pros, for example, during the COVID pandemic, is there were a lot of funds allocated to states directly, and being part to the state, we were able to expedite our program design and launch and those allocations of funds directly through Commerce and supporting. Whereas other housing finance agencies had to wait lengthy periods of time for their state governments to appropriate them funds in order to get going. So that's one benefit of being connected to the state government more than other housing finance agencies. Other states also have a lot of various entities for their federal affordable housing programs. They may have their housing finance agency, then they may also have housing divisions or departments within their Department of Commerce or elsewhere. But we're really fortunate in that we have all of our federal affordable housing programs in one shop. They're all within the broader housing division of the Department of Commerce, of which the Montana Board of Housing is a component unit. So we have a real opportunity to break silos in how we administer our programs to ensure the maximum benefit to our constituents and to making sure that we can get feasible and high quality, safe, affordable housing delivered to families in Montana.
Does the structure of MBOH reflect any other uniquely Montanan challenges or opportunities?
I think, again, going back to what I last said, we do have a lot of opportunities to look at how our different programs work together, and where I've worked in other states, and you may have, large task forces of, a half a dozen different state or local entities or the Housing Finance Agency all trying to collaborate on projects that you all have funding sources and an invested interest in. But we're a one-stop shop, so we can have our LIHTC, our low-income housing tax credit allocation, but also other HUD fund sources, all within our housing program. So we have a greater degree of visibility into what we're doing and have less administrative hurdles to jump in trying to collaborate with other outside entities. So really advantageous from a reducing silos perspective.
Can you talk about the contributions MBOH has made to safe and affordable housing and the impacts that has on Montana communities and families?
For over the last 50 years, since 1975, one of the primary deliverables of the Montana Board of Housing is to provide affordable financing primarily for first-time home buyers who are of low or moderate income. And over our 50-year history, we've provided 47,700 primary and secondary or down payment assistance loans, totaling nearly $3.8 billion statewide. So this is a huge impact on Montana families and communities. As we know, when families are able to buy an affordable and safe home, it provides predictability for their finances for, say, a 30-year fixed mortgage term. They can get more invested in their neighbors and with their community. Their kids can go to school and be secure in the school that they're at. So that has a whole additional benefits to a community beyond just the family that's assisted with an affordable mortgage. On the rental side, we have about 9,500 affordable rental homes with long-term periods of affordability from 30 to 50 years. So Montana renters who are struggling to pay rent have a benefit in these programs that the rents do increase, but they're limited under the U.S. Housing and Urban Development or by the U.S. Treasury on how much they can increase any given year. So those renters can better absorb more modest increases in rent and don't have the instability or risk of finding out, tomorrow that my landlord has decided to rent their home to a family member, and so I need to leave next month. The programs that we administer offer that level of stability for folks.
As executive director, what accomplishment are you most proud of?
So when I joined the board in late 2018, I was hired as the operations manager, and one of my roles was to be our project manager for what was called our GSE work plan. And my background before coming to the Board of Housing was on the multifamily rental side. I did not know what GSE stood for and had to ask my predecessor at the time, Bruce Brenstall. It stands for Government Sponsored Enterprises. So this is Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. So I was asked to help lead a project plan to help move the Montana Board of Housing to receive what's called our seller servicer designation with either or both of those government-sponsored enterprises. And that gives housing finance agencies access to do additional types of conventional mortgage lending that the Board of Housing wasn't able to do at the time. So of course, this was a very long-term project plan. It's pretty complicated to enter into that conventional market space. We did receive our seller servicer designation from Freddie Mac right as kind of the onset of COVID happened. And with the COVID pandemic, we had to put a pause on moving that project forward. Since we've been able to move through that COVID period, we re-picked up that project and had a lot of internal decisions around what was the best for Montana given the resources that we have. And ultimately, we issued a request for proposals for a master servicer, and we selected our sister housing finance agency in Idaho to be our new master servicer. And last November, we launched our new master servicer program with Idaho Housing Finance Association. So they're now servicing loans that are purchased by the Board of Housing. And they also pool those loans into what's called mortgage-backed securities to deliver to Ginnie Mae, Fannie Mae, or Freddie Mac. So a lot of lingo there, but what this means is we have additional abilities to be able to leverage the seller server designations of our Idaho partner, so we can offer more programs and products to our borrowers. And it's also really worked well with our participating lenders. Since we've launched, we did an average of about $4.3 million in new loan reservations per week. This first week of June, we did over 8 million in reservations, and that represented 35 Montana families who are in our pipeline to purchase their first home. So that's a pretty incredible accomplishment and required a complete change in our business model.
What's the biggest challenge MBOH has faced, and how was it overcome?
I think there's been a lot of challenges over its 50-year history. I'll speak to the challenge during my tenure, which was the COVID pandemic. Over the course of several pieces of federal legislation, the CARES Act and the ARPA Act, the Housing Division within the Department of Commerce received over $400 million in one-time only programs that we needed to stand up really rapidly to be able to serve Montanans who were suffering impacts from the COVID pandemic. These were programs for emergency rental assistance and homeowner assistance primarily. In order to access those new resources, we had to do a lot of the program design and policy work in advance with the staff that we have before we could get those federal funds to be able to hire additional workforce to actually administer the programs. So we had a large number of staff from the Board of Housing leadership team working really specifically on the Homeowner Assistance Fund program. It required an entire plan to submit to Treasury with underlying needs assessments and data and how are we going to deploy the program and what's going to be the target group served. And that plan had to be approved before we could access those administrative dollars. So this was a lot of double and triple duty for staff during a challenging time when many of us had, our own kids at home because school closures had happened. And that was a difficult time, and we worked through it. Over that course of the Housing Division broadly, not just the Board of Housing, but the Housing Division grew from about 60 staff to over 100 staff. So the ability to absorb that amount of new programs with a wide variety of federal regulations and with an urgency to get them out as quickly as possible, with rental assistance wanting to make that available as soon as we could, especially with a federal moratorium on evictions expiring, was a huge driver for us in trying to get those programs out and rolling for Montanans.
You worked a lot of overtime during that period.
A lot of us worked a lot of overtime. Yeah, when we were all working at home, I was pregnant at the time with my second kid, and I had a makeshift desk of a cardboard box with my Surface laptop on it. It was the most comfortable I had. And I would be working at often 4 in the morning until later in the evening. And I've got a great picture of my 2-year-old who didn't realize how important toilet paper was at the time, and she decided to take a roll and like strew it all over my little office space. So I have a great picture of my 2-year-old covered in toilet paper with my makeshift office, but we did what we had to do, and that's the role for us as public servants, is to deliver those services for Montanans.
Can you share any funny or surprising memories about your time with the Board of Housing?
So one of the funny ones is each year the Board of Housing participates in what's called the Mountain Plains Regional Housing Summit. And this is a convening of Mountain Plains region housing finance agencies, and we get together to share challenges and struggles, solutions that are really specific to our state. So this is Idaho, Montana, the Dakotas, Wyoming, and a couple of others. And so at the end of the COVID pandemic, we were the ones to host the first in-person convening that had happened in a couple of years. And we hosted it in Billings. And as part of our offerings, we invited people to join us at a local establishment for karaoke. And it was a real hoot, and it's one of those, it's going to stay at the Crystal Lounge. What happens at the Crystal Lounge stays at the Crystal Lounge. But I had a great time doing an Alice in Chains number with our underwriter from New York City. So that's a rather surprising moment that you wouldn't consider, and it's become a little bit of a thing at some of our industry conferences now going forward, where someone's got to find to host and do karaoke. And the reason I share it, even though it's not specifically work related, is I think as a leader it's important to not take yourself too seriously all of the time, and it's okay to even let yourself be a little bit of a fool in front of your staff, because we all need to have a laugh sometimes. It's hard work and we need to work hard, but let's have a moment to enjoy our company and have a little bit of a laugh too.
What legislation from the 2025 session will have a particular impact on MBOH?
There's certainly been a number of bills signed already from the 25 legislative session that have a certain impact on housing development across the state. These include bills that are looking at how developers can be more flexible and how they build and where they build. Bills such as allowing for single staircase construction up to 6 stories, or reducing parking requirements for new developments. These have huge cost implications for projects. And these bills follow a suite of legislation that occurred in the 2023 session that was labeled the Montana Miracle. And I have directors from other housing finance agencies across the country really looking at Montana and are a bit envious over what we were able to accomplish between those 2 sessions. Some of these new bills, they're going to take longer for us to see the results on the ground because development cycles can take multiple years. But I'm really pleased with what our governor has sponsored through his housing task force and what the legislature picked up and carried to the finish line. We are waiting for a bill, a pending governor's signature, House Bill 924. This bill would establish the Montana Growth and Opportunity Trust, and under that trust, a new Montana Housing Trust. This would be, if it were signed into law, the first time that affordable housing will receive ongoing statutory appropriations in Montana's history. And this program will provide additional gap financing for affordable rental development, and will also be able to direct an influx of funds, if it's signed, to our Veterans Home Loan Program, so we can provide more lower cost mortgage loans to Montana veterans and National Guard members in our state.
And how will the Board of Housing celebrate its 50th anniversary?
I think a big component of any sort of commemorative celebration is just to get the word out about what we've done and what we've accomplished and where we want to go from here. And some of it is symbolic in nature, and that's okay. We hosted an event at our Montana Housing Partnership Conference in Billings last month, where myself and my 2 predecessors, Bruce Brensdell and Marie Rude, held a panel to talk about the board's 50-year history and what it's accomplished. We've launched a website with information about our history and timeline, including a slide reel with some of those milestones and our board members throughout our history. We've deployed a custom logo for our email signatures and some marketing materials that we make available when we go to events or meet with participating lenders. We're doing this interview, and hopefully we'll share some information on social media. And we're also working on an op-ed to release to Montana media if they're interested in picking it up.
Can you tell us what's in store for the next 50 years?
I hope for the next 50 years that we will see a lot more development of affordable rental homes of all shapes and sizes throughout all of Montana's communities. We've been able to leverage the federal resources that we have in a much more extensive way over the last 5 to 6 years. There were some changes at the federal level to what's called the 4% low-income housing tax credit that have made that program a lot more competitive and of interest to investors and developers. In 2019, we got one project under this resource for $6 million. The next year it was $112 million. I think the year after that it was maybe $149 million. And we have a very large pipeline of projects using this 4% resource with tax-exempt bonds to get more affordable, attainable housing supply delivered on the market. In addition, on the home ownership side, I think we'll continue to work with our partner in Idaho to consider additional loan product offerings that we can launch. There are some specific products under Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac for housing finance agencies to serve borrowers at moderate income levels. And so we're certainly exploring what those new loan products might look like and whether or not those would be good choices for us to offer to Montana families.
How can people in different situations get help from MBOH today?
That's a great question. So if you're an interested home buyer, we primarily serve first-time home buyers. The best way to start is to go on our website and look at our participating lender list. We partner with lenders and banking institutions throughout the state who originate the mortgage loans for us, and then we purchase from them. And so all an interested home buyer would need to do is go to that list and see which banking institution works best for them. They'll see a lot of familiar faces. Most of the banks in Montana are participating lenders, and say, I'm interested in a Montana Board of Housing loan. And that participating lender partner can work with the family to determine what loan products they may be eligible for. Perhaps they may be eligible for one of our down payment assistance programs as well. And then they can get connected with a HUD-certified housing counselor for first-time home buyer counseling. That is a requirement for most of our programs. And we partner with NeighborWorks Montana and their network of HUD-certified housing counselors to make those courses available. And so that would be kind of the first two steps, talking with your participating lender and looking into a first-time home buyer class. We want to make sure getting into your first home is a huge step. And families really need to think about the pros and cons and their financial situation to make sure that they're making a sound financial decision for them. For lower income renters, we also have on our website a list of all of our low-income housing tax credit projects, as well as other housing projects that aren't specifically under the Board of Housing, but as part of our broader housing division. Those properties keep their own waiting lists, and so renters who are looking for an affordable rental apartment can contact those properties directly to see what their availability is. There's also an online service called MT Housing Search. And this is essentially like a Craigslist, but for affordable housing apartments only. And so that's a good place for individuals who are interested in finding an affordable rental to see what's available. It also has more details about the accessibility features of the rental homes. And that's certainly something that persons with disabilities or seniors may have interest in, making sure that the home they select is going to work for them as they age.
Great. Is there anything else you want to add?
I would add for seniors, the Board of Housing offers a reverse annuity mortgage loan. This is a loan up to $150,000, and we can provide the payments to the homeowner using the equity that they've accrued in their home, so they can stay in their home and age in place. There's also the ability within that program for cash outs to pay if there's, say, a modest balance remaining on a primary mortgage loan, to pay that off, or to make accessibility improvements to the home, so it's the best home for that family that it can be. So that's another program offering. And then I previously mentioned our Veterans Home Loan Program. If House Bill 924 is signed into law and we have additional funds into that program, we would love to be able to offer that lending product to veterans and Montana National Guard members. We really appreciate their service. And right now that program's lending at a 4.5% interest rate, which is pretty darn good in today's market. So we're hoping to be able to offer more of those loans to Montanans.
Great. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.